Somewhere in the world right now, someone is saying their last words. They do not know it yet. They are talking to someone they love, or they are alone, or they are laughing, or they are afraid, but they are saying something, and whatever they are saying, it is the last thing they will ever say on this earth. The people whose stories you are about to hear were some of the most famous human beings who ever lived. Their voices were heard by hundreds of millions of people. Their faces were known around the world. And yet almost nobody knows what they said in their final moments. Some of their last words were beautiful, some were heartbreaking, some were completely ordinary, said by someone who had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything would be over, and some of them said something that nobody has ever fully explained. Today you are going to hear 10 of the most documented, most verified, most impossible to forget final words in history. I need you to stay with me, because number 6 on this list is the one that broke me when I researched it, not because of what was said, but because of who heard it and what happened immediately after. These are real. Every single word is documented. Every account has been verified by historians, journalists or family members who were there. Their last words. Nobody was supposed to hear this. Let us begin. Welcome to Retro Remind Network, the channel that pulls out the stories the world was never supposed to forget. In every great life, there is a final moment, a last breath, a last heartbeat, and often a last word for most people. Those final words disappear into silence, heard only by whoever happened to be in the room, forgotten within days. But for the 10 people in this video, their final words were recorded, written down, remembered, and in some cases, they revealed something about those people that nothing else in their entire lives ever could. 10 people, 10 final moments, and 10 last words that will stay with you long after this video ends. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe. We begin with perhaps the most mysterious final phone call in entertainment history. Marilyn Monroe, the most photographed woman of the 20th century, the most desired actress in Hollywood, a woman who lit up every room she ever entered, and whose smile was known on every continent on Earth. On the evening of August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe made a phone call. She called her close friend, a man named Peter Lawford. Lawford was a Hollywood actor, a member of Frank Sinatra's famous Rat Pack, and one of the inner circle of President John F. Kennedy's social world. Marilyn and Peter had been friends for years. The call was brief, and near the end of it, Marilyn Monroe said something that Peter Lawford spent the rest of his life trying to understand. Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself, because you're a nice guy. Peter Lawford later said that her voice was strange during that call, slow, heavy, as if she was very tired, or as if she had already made up her mind about something. He hung up the phone. He did not call back. In the early hours of August 5th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her bedroom in Los Angeles. She was 36 years old. The cause of death was recorded as an overdose of barbiturates. Peter Lawford told this story in interviews years later. He said he had replayed that phone call in his mind thousands of times. The words "say goodbye to yourself, because you're a nice guy" suggested to him that she already knew she would not be speaking to anyone again. Whether those were truly her last words, or whether she spoke to anyone else after that call, has never been fully confirmed. But they are the last documented words of Marilyn Monroe, and nobody has ever fully explained why she said them the way she did. Number 2. John Lennon. If the previous story was about words spoken in private, this next story is about the complete absence of words. John Lennon, one half the most famous songwriting partnership in history. Man whose voice shaped the soundtrack of the 20th century. A man who spent his life putting words to music, and who had just finished his first album in 5 years. December 8, 1980, New York City. John Lennon had spent the day at the recording studio working on a new track. He was happy, by all accounts genuinely, deeply happy. He had told friends that this felt like the beginning of a new chapter. His music was back, his life felt good. At around 10:30 that evening, Lennon returned home to the Dakota Building on Central Park West with his wife, Yoko Ono. As he walked through the archway toward the entrance, a man stepped forward from the shadows. John Lennon was shot 4 times in the back. He managed to walk stumbling up the steps into the lobby. The doorman rushed to him. Lennon looked at him and said, "I'm shot." Those were the last 2 words John Lennon ever spoke. He was taken by police car to Roosevelt Hospital. Because the ambulance was taking too long, he lost consciousness in the car. He was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital at 11:07 p.m. He was 40 years old. I have shot 2 words. The last words of one of the greatest artists who ever lived, not a profound philosophical statement, not a message for the world, not a lyric, just 2 words spoken by a man who is still trying to understand what had just happened to him. The man who shot him, Mark David Chapman, had asked Lennon for an autograph earlier. That same day Lennon had signed it. Chapman waited 6 hours outside the building, and then he came back. The signed album was still in Chapman's pocket when the police arrested him. Number 3. Bob Marley. Some final words are loud, some are whispered, and some are spoken to the most important person in a man's life. Bob Marley, the most famous musician Jamaica has ever produced, a man whose music became the soundtrack of freedom movements across the world, a man who could fill stadiums on every continent, and who, despite all of that, had never lost the simple wisdom of the boy who grew up in the hills of St. Anne. By 1981, Bob Marley was dying. The cancer that had started beneath his toenail had spread. It had moved to his lungs, his brain, his liver. There was nothing more the doctors could do. They put him on a plane hoping to get him home to Jamaica so he could die on the island he loved. The plane never made it. Bob Marley's condition deteriorated so rapidly that the flight was diverted to Miami. He was taken to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. His wife Rita was there. His children were there. His closest friends were there. His son Ziggy, who was 16 years old, was sitting beside him when the end came. Bob Marley turned to his son, and he said, "Money can't buy life." Those were his last words, 4 words spoken to his 16-year-old son from a man who had earned millions of dollars from his music and who was now lying in a hospital bed, dying, with every dollar he had ever earned completely unable to help him. Bob Marley died on May 11, 1981. He was 36 years old. Money can't buy life. Ziggy Marley has spoken about those final words in interviews throughout his life. He said that those 4 words from his father spoken in those final moments shaped everything he has ever done since. Every decision, every song, every choice for words, and they changed a life. Number 4. Princess Diana. This is the story that is hardest to tell, not because of what was said, but because of what was not said, and because of the last face she ever saw. Princess Diana, the most photographed woman in history, beloved across the world for her warmth, her compassion, and her ability to make ordinary people feel seen and valued in a world that so often ignored them. August 31, 1997, Paris, France. The Pont de l'Arme Tunnel. At 12:23 in the morning, the black Mercedes carrying Princess Diana entered the tunnel. Inside the car, Diana, her companion Dodi Fade, the driver Henry Paul, and a bodyguard named Trevor Rees-Jones. The car was traveling at high speed, chased by photographers on motorcycles. Inside the tunnel, the car struck a pillar. The impact was catastrophic. The first emergency responders to reach the car were French firefighters, sapeurs-pompiers. One of them, a man named Xavier Courlan, was the first person to reach Diana. She was conscious. According to the official French emergency services report, Diana was confused, but speaking. She did not know where she was. She did not know what had happened. She did not know who she was talking to. She looked at the firefighter and said, "My God, what has happened?" Those are the last words of Princess Diana recorded in any official document. She lost consciousness shortly after she was taken to the Petit-Salpêtrière hospital in Paris, where doctors fought for her life for 4 hours. At 4 o'clock in the morning on August 31, 1997, Princess Diana was pronounced dead. She was 36 years old. My God, what has happened? She had no idea in her final conscious moments. Diana had absolutely no idea what had just happened. She had no idea who she was talking to. She had no idea she was dying. Some people find comfort in it, others find it the saddest part of the whole story. Number 5. Michael Jackson. Every story in this video has been about someone who said something final without knowing it was final. This next story is different. This one is about a man who, at least by some accounts, may have known Michael Jackson, the king of pop, the best-selling solo music artist of all time. A man whose influence on music, dance, fashion, and culture cannot be measured. In 2009, Michael Jackson was preparing for the biggest comeback of his career, 50 concerts at the O2 Arena in London. Is it tour the whole world was watching? On the evening of June 24, 2009, the night before he died, Michael Jackson completed his final rehearsal at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Everyone who was there that night has said the same thing. It was extraordinary. He was extraordinary. It was the performance of a lifetime. After the rehearsal, Jackson gathered the entire production crew on the stage and he spoke to them. Several crew members later gave interviews about what he said that night, and the thing that stayed with all of them was that he did not sound like a man who was about to launch the greatest tour of his career. He sounded like a man who was saying goodbye. He told the crew, "I love you all, take care of each other, this might be it. This might be the last time." On the morning of June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson was found unresponsive in his bedroom at the Carrollwood estate in Los Angeles. Emergency services were called at 12:21 p.m. He was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. at UCLA Medical Center. He was 50 years old. It never happened. The 50 concerts were cancelled. The production, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, was shut down overnight. The rehearsal footage was later released as a documentary film watched by millions of people around the world, as close as most of us will ever get to seeing what that final night looked like. This might be the last time it was. Number 6. Amelia Earhart. This is the story I promised you. Story number 6, the one that broke me. When I researched it, not because of what was said, but because of what those words meant and because of what happened, or rather, what did not happen immediately after. Amelia Earhart, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, a symbol of courage and freedom at a time when the world told women they had limits. A woman who spent her entire life refusing to accept any limit that anyone tried to place on her. In 1937, Earhart was attempting to become the first person to fly around the entire world along the equatorial route, journey of over 29,000 miles. She and her navigator Fred Noonan had already completed more than 22,000 miles of the journey. On July 2, 1937, Earhart and Noonan took off from Lae Airfield in New Guinea. Their destination was Howland Island, a tiny speck of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Less than 2 miles long, surrounded by thousands of miles of open sea in every direction, a United States Coast Guard ship, the Itasca, was stationed near Howland Island to help guide the plane in using radio signals. At 7:42 a.m. a radio transmission came through from Earhart's plane. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low, being unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet. The Itasca responded immediately. They sent signals. They burned oil in the ship's furnace to create a smoke trail. She might be able to see. They tried everything. Earhart's transmissions continued growing more urgent with each one. At 8:44 a.m. she sent the last radio message anyone would ever receive from her. "We are running north and south." Then nothing. The Itasca waited. They sent signals. They called her name on every frequency. The entire crew stood at their posts, listening. For hours, Amelia Earhart never responded again. The United States Navy launched the largest search operation in its history up to that point. 4,000 men, 10 ships, 102 aircraft covering 250,000 square miles of ocean. They found nothing. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were never found. No confirmed wreckage. No confirmed remains. Nothing. She was 39 years old. "We are running north and south." 5 words spoken into a radio heard by a ship's crew who spent years wondering if there was anything more they could have done. And then silence as absolute and complete as the ocean itself. To this day, nobody knows exactly where Amelia Earhart is. Nobody knows exactly what happened in the final minutes of her flight. Nobody knows if she landed. Nobody knows if she survived the crash. Nobody knows. We are running north and south. Those 5 words are all we have. Number 7. Abraham Lincoln. Sometimes the most heartbreaking final words are the happiest ones. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, the man who ended slavery in America, one of the most written about human beings in history. April 14, 1865, Washington, D.C. Ford's Theater. Lincoln was in an unusually good mood that evening. The Civil War, which had torn America apart for 4 years and cost over 600,000 lives, was finally coming to an end. Confederate General Robert E. Lee had surrendered just 5 days earlier. The country was healing. Lincoln could feel it. Lincoln was sitting in the presidential box with his wife, Mary, watching the play Our American Cousin. He was laughing. The audience below could hear him laughing. Mary Lincoln later told the doctors and the historians who interviewed her in the years that followed about the last thing her husband said to her. She had leaned close to him during the performance because they were sitting very close together that evening, and she said to him, "What will people think of us sitting so close together?" Abraham Lincoln turned to his wife. He was still smiling from the play. He looked at her and said, "I would like to visit the Holy Land someday, see those places hallowed by the footsteps of the Savior." He was still speaking, still smiling, still thinking about the future. At that moment, John Wilkes Booth entered the presidential box from behind. The shot was fired at 10:15 p.m. Abraham Lincoln never regained consciousness. He was carried across the street to the Peterson House, where he died at 7:22 the following morning. He was 56 years old. He was talking about traveling, about the Holy Land, about the future, about things he wanted to do, about hope. He had absolutely no idea. Number 8. Tupac Shakur. Some people go out fighting, some go out peaceful, and some refuse to give anyone the satisfaction of a single word. Tupac Shakur, one of the greatest rappers who ever lived, a poet whose words about violence, injustice, and survival came from lived experience, not performance. A man who had already been shot once before and survived. September 7, 1996, Las Vegas, Nevada. Tupac had attended the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand earlier that evening. Afterwards, he was traveling in a car with Death Row Records founder Suge Knight when a white BMW pulled alongside them. Multiple shots were fired. Tupac was hit 4 times. He was taken to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. He underwent surgery. For 6 days he fought. On September 13, 1996, detectives visited Tupac in his hospital room. This was standard procedure. They needed to ask him questions about what had happened, who was in the car, what he saw, if he could identify anyone. One of the detectives leaned in close and asked, "Who shot you?" Tupac Shakur looked at him and he said, "You know, I ain't gonna tell you that." Those were among the last documented words of Tupac Shakur. He died later that same day, September 13, 1996. He was 25 years old. Even in his final hours, even dying, even when it could have meant justice, he refused to give anyone what they wanted. To this day, nobody has ever been charged with the murder of Tupac Shakur. Number 9. Steve Irwin. Not every person in this video was a musician or a president or a Hollywood star. This next story is about a man who was simply the most alive person most of us had ever seen on television. Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, an Australian wildlife expert and TV presenter whose love of animals was so overwhelming, so genuine and so infectious that he made hundreds of millions of people around the world care about creatures they had never thought about before. September 4, 2006, the Great Barrier Reef, Queensland, Australia. Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, an Australian wildlife expert and TV presenter whose love of animals was so overwhelming, so genuine and so infectious that he made hundreds of millions of people around the world care about creatures they had never thought about before. September 4, 2006, the Great Barrier Reef, Queensland, Australia. Steve was filming an underwater documentary called Ocean's Deadliest. He was snorkeling over a sandflat near Bat Reef, near Port Douglas. The water was clear and calm. It was a beautiful morning. A large short-tailed stingray with a wingspan of approximately 2 meters was resting on the seafloor below him. Steve swam over it. The stingray, in what marine biologists have described as a purely defensive, reflexive reaction, thrust its barbed tail upward. The barb penetrated Steve Irwin's chest and pierced his heart directly. His cameraman Justin Lyon was filming nearby. He saw what happened. He reached Steve immediately. According to the account given by crew members who were present, Steve Irwin pulled the barb from his own chest stand. Then he looked at the people around him, the cameraman, the crew, and he said, "I'm dying." He lost consciousness within minutes despite CPR and every effort by the crew. Steve Irwin was pronounced dead before the boat could reach shore. He was 44 years old. "I'm dying, not I'm hurt, not help me, not fear or panic or confusion." He simply knew. And he said it calmly, clearly. The world lost something irreplaceable that morning, a man whose entire life had been spent in love with the natural world. He can buy it, in the end, in the most unexpected, most random way imaginable. Number 10. Thomas Edison. We end with a story that is not sad, Not frightening, not mysterious, we end with a story that is in the most unexpected way beautiful. Thomas Edison, the man who invented the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, a man who held over 1,000 patents in his name and who shaped modern civilization more than almost any other human being in history. By October 1931, Thomas Edison was 84 years old and dying. He had slipped into a coma several days earlier. His family, his wife Mina, and his children gathered around his bed waiting. At one point during those final days, Edison briefly regained consciousness. He opened his eyes, he looked at his wife, and then he looked slowly toward the window. His wife Mina later described what happened next. She said that her husband seemed to see something she could not see, something beyond the window, beyond the room, beyond anything in the world. She knew. She leaned close to hear what he was saying. Thomas Edison, the man who had spent his entire life illuminating the world, looked toward that unseen place and said, "It is very beautiful over there." He died shortly afterward, October 18, 1931. It is very beautiful over there. Nobody knows what he saw. Nobody knows what he was looking at. His wife believed he was looking at something real, something that she simply could not see from where she was standing. And whether you believe that or not, whether you think it was a vision or a dream or simply the mind of a dying man finding peace, there is something about those 6 words that stops you completely. It is very beautiful over there. After a lifetime of illuminating darkness for everyone else, Thomas Edison's final words were about light. 10 people, 10 final moments, 10 last words. Marilyn said goodbye without anyone knowing it was goodbye. John said 2 words, and they were the last 2 words of a lifetime of music. Bob spoke 4 words of wisdom to his son that shaped everything that followed. Diana asked a question she would never hear the answer to. Michael told his crew it might be the last time. Amelia sent 5 words into a radio and then vanished. Lincoln talked about the future just before he lost his Tupac refused to give anyone anything, even at the very end. Steve knew and said so with complete calm, and Thomas saw something beautiful that nobody else could see. We never know which words will be our last. We never know which conversation, which phone call, which moment will be the final one. And maybe that is not something to be afraid of. Maybe it is simply a reminder to say the things that matter now, today, before it is too late. If this video stayed with you, if any one of these stories moved you, please subscribe to Retro Remind Network. We find the stories the world was never supposed to forget, and we make sure they are never forgotten. Share this with someone you care about. Leave a comment telling me which final words hit you the hardest. I will see you in the next one.